Good evening. This is Pamela, and you're listening to Watchmen on the Pod. Right, we are going to pick up in Codeword Barbelon, Danger in the Vatican, the Sons of Laloya, and their plans for world domination by P.B. Stuart. We are in chapter 3. I just bit my lip again. Gunpowder Plot, Guy Fawkes, and his friends. The point is clear. The confessions are direct. The purpose is palpable. Palpable. Palpable? Palpable. All the lines of your level are drawn to the center of the powder mine. Lord of Northampton, the Gunpowder Plot trial. In whatever place of the Catholic world a Jesuit is insulted or resisted, no matter how insignificant he may be, he is sure to be avenged. And this we know. Dead men tell no tales. Ponder well on these things, and remember you cannot escape us. The words of two Jesuits combined into one. Every year on November 5th, English celebrate the most famous event in their glorious history, the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, known variously in some countries as Bonfire Night, Guy Fawkes Night, Fireworks Night, or Pope's Day. The memory of this important event, the daring attempt of a suicide bomber, Guy Fawkes, aided by his friends, is faithfully perpetuated. The background of the performers and their purposes are too little understood, lost in fireworks. The chief actors and their motives are now revealed. The first fact we note is that of the 13 Catholic noblemen involved in the daring plot, 5 were Jesuits. Well, before the Jesuits' expulsion from Europe, England had already been wise enough to rid herself of the influence of the assassins from her halls of power. On July 3rd, 1580, Queen Elizabeth I, daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, issued a statute forbidding all Jesuits to enter England. The Queen was already under general excommunication by virtue of the bull in Soina Domini, was forced to take even more decided action when Pope Pius V, 1566 to 1672, under the advice of the influential Jesuit parson and his brethren, had some years earlier passed a bull that forbade all Roman Catholics from taking the oath of allegiance to the English crown. The Pope's thunderbolt read, "The number of the ungodly has so much grown in power that there is no place left in the world which they have not tried to corrupt with their most wicked doctrines. And Elizabeth, the pretended Queen of England and the servant of crime, has assisted in this. This very woman, having seized the crown and monstrously usurped the place of supreme head of the church in all England, has followed and embraced the errors of the heretics, Protestants, abolished the sacrifice of the Mass, celibacy, and Catholic ceremony. We are compelled by necessity to take up against her the weapons of justice, and declare the nobles, subjects, and people of the said realm, and all others who have any way sworn oaths to her, to be forever absolved from such an oath. We charge and command all, and singular the nobles, subjects, peoples, and others aforesaid, they do not dare obey her orders, mandates, and laws." The next pope, Gregory XII, succeeded his predecessor by sending a well-worded letter to his nuncio Sega in Madrid, dated December 12, 1580, inciting all Catholics to the murder of the Queen. Since that guilty woman, Queen Elizabeth I of England, rules over two such noble kingdoms of Christendom, and is the cause of so much injury to the Catholic faith, and loss of so many millions of souls, i.e., Protestants, there is no doubt that whosoever sends her out of the world with the pious intention of doing God's service not only does not sin, but gains merit, especially having regard to the sentence pronounced against her by Pius V of holy memory in 1570. Pope Pius V had excommunicated Elizabeth from the Catholic Church. Interestingly, Miguel de Cervantes, in his book Don Quixote, I can't say that, Quixote, also referred to this pope as His Holiness Pope Pius V of happy memory. The connection with Don Quixote will be made later. 1 month after Pope Gregory's fiat, January 10th, 1580, Queen Elizabeth signed the Fifth Penal Statute, inflicting heavy fines, imprisonment, and other imprisonment on all who harbored Jesuits and seminary priests. Historian Manfred Barthel, in his book, The Jesuit, confirmed that his book, Jesuit, confirmed that in response to what the Catholic Church termed an intolerant act, the Penal Statute of 1581, Jesuits were entrusted with the mission of arranging for her to be disposed and assassinated if necessary. Manfred Barthel writes, there were several seminaries to train English Jesuits like an elite form of commandos who would be infiltrated back into their native country, England. In fact, things had gotten so bad that Elizabeth, on February 18th, 1587, in order to beat back the waves of Jesuit emissaries that were overflowing her country, reluctantly signed the death warrant for the execution of her Catholic cousin, Mary Stuart of Scotland, whom the Catholics had declared the rightful Queen of England. But it would be another 2 decades before the Jesuits would again launch their most audacious offensive against the English throne and Parliament in November 1605. This was under the censorship of the Jesuit prince Claudio Acquaviva, General Jesuit. I said that backward. The Jesuit general, whose signature, you will recall, is said to have been on the Secreta Monita, c. 14, said Johann Moschium. All the resources of inventive genius and refined policy, all the efforts of insinuating craft and audacious rebellion were employed to bring back Great Britain and Ireland under the yoke of Rome. Dr. Moschium will tell us of what took place on November 5th, 1605. About the beginning of this century, 1605, 3 Jesuits, of whom Garnet, superior of the Society in England, was the chief, conspired to form the most horrid plot that is known in the annals of history. The design of this conspiracy was nothing less than to destroy at one blow King James I, Prince of Wales, and both houses of Parliament by the explosion of an immense quantity of gunpowder, 36 barrels. And that's a dot, and then down here it says William Russell's Modern Europe, page 206 to 207 tells us that it was 36 barrels of gunpowder hidden under a huge pile of wood in a vault beneath the House of Lords, usually let as a coal cellar, which had been hired by Percy, one of the plotters. Wow, crazy. When discovered, Guy Fawkes had the matches in his pocket, hiding in a dark corner of the cellar. Truly, this timely discovery of the plot was Digitus Dia, the hand of God. It's in the footnote, by the way. Okay, here we go. About the beginning of this century, 1605, 3 Jesuits, I read that, I'm sorry, which they concealed for that purpose in the vaults under the House of Lords. The bigots concerned in it imagined that as soon as this horrible deed was performed, it would be at full liberty to restore popery to its former credit and substitute it in place of the Protestant religion. This odious conspiracy, which was providentially discovered when it was rife for execution, is commonly known in Britain under the denomination of the Gunpowder Treason, Guy Fawkes Night. Manfred Barthel, in a book that was approved by the Jesuits, see footnote to page 164 thereof, confirms the event just described. Guy Guido Fawkes was an English Catholic gentleman who, with a band of co-conspirators, plotted to blow up both houses of Parliament along with King James I and the entire royal family on November 5th, 1605. The plot was betrayed at the last minute. Numerous barrels of gunpowder had somehow managed to be secreted in the cellar of the House of Parliament. Conspirators, mostly drawn from the ranks of the old Catholic gentry, were sent to the scaffold. Gunpowder Plot was only the best known, best remembered of a dozen or so popish plots. The object of all of them was to restore the old religion in place of the Anglican state church established by Henry VIII, and in most cases to put a Catholic on the English throne. Wow. Prior to embarking on this murderous venture, the plotters met together at a mass and swore a most solemn oath on the Holy Sacrament, pledging to blow up the king and the Houses of Parliament, together with all the judges, Lord Chancellor, bishops, and the officers of state on the next sitting of Parliament, November 5th, 1605. However, the plot was foiled after suspicion was raised by an anonymous letter delivered on October 26th to a member of the upper house of the English Parliament, Lord Monteagle. That was 10 days before the state opening of Parliament. An account taken from the King's Book states Lord Monteagle, ready to go to supper at 7 o'clock at night, one of his footmen, whom he had sent on an errand over the street, was met by a man of reasonable tall personage who delivered him a letter, charging him to put it in my lord, his master's hand. Lord Monteagle, a reformed Catholic and a brother-in-law of one of the conspirators, was just sitting to dinner at his home in Hoxton when the said letter arrived. It pleaded, "My lord, out of the love I bear to some of your friends, I have a care for your preservation. Therefore, I would advise you, as you tender your life, to devise some excuse to shift your attendance of this Parliament. For God and man have concurred to punish the wickedness of this time. And think not slightly of this advertisement. Retire yourself into your country, where you may expect the event in safety. For though there be no appearance of any stir, yet I say they shall receive a terrible blow. Parliament, and yet they shall not see who hurts them. This counsel is not to be condemned, because it may do you good and can do you no harm, for the danger is past as soon as you have burnt the letter. And I hope God will give you the grace to make good use of it, to whose holy protection I commend you." We note in passing that notwithstanding what he knew, the hold of Catholicism was so strong over Lord Monteagle that he allowed his eldest son Henry to be brought up a Catholic, and gave permission for his crippled daughter Frances to take vows of a nun. On his death at his residence in Great Hollingbury on July 1st, 1622, he was reported to have received the last rites of the Roman Catholic Church. Let us revert to Jesuits' doings. The plot alluded to in said letter was to destroy the English crown and all senior statesmen, and thus open the way for the invasion of the Spanish, i.e., Catholic army, already in waiting. The request was that the King of Spain would send an army hither into England, and that the forces of the Catholics in England should be prepared to join with him and do him service. After the murderous scheme had been foiled, a careful investigation revealed that Henry Garnet, S.J., 1555 to 1606, who was then superior of the English Jesuits, had been both a conspirator and confidant and in the diabolical plot. Two other Jesuit priests, John Gerard and Oswald Tesmond, known as Father Greenway, were also party to the conspiracy. Other conspirators, 11 in number, including the linchpin to the whole scheme, Catesby, were all devout Roman Catholics. Father Garnet, Jesuit superior, a former student of the Jesuit moral theologian, Cardinal Bellarmine, who zealously defended his student's actions, admitted to having known of the plot. He claimed only through the confessional. Uh, Garnet even tried to link Lord Monteagle to the conspiracy. Nevertheless, he was arrested and tried for treason. In his defense, he told the tribunal, as a priest, he could not be held in any way responsible for the villainous conspiracy because, according to him, it was not proper for a Catholic priest to reveal any secret, no matter how criminal, that was given in the confessional box. With this, Cardinal Bellarmine agreed. However, a fact worthy of mention is that the same rule which declared that the facts of confession could not be disclosed when the lives of sovereigns were endangered, nevertheless required its confessors, i.e., all priests, to betray to the Inquisition those whom their female penitents accused in confession of having seduced and abused them. What an absurd and horrible contradiction! The following is a true record, verbatim, of the voluntary declaration of Guido Fawkes, given in the presence of the councillors, commissions, or judges, whose names are underwritten. It reads in pertinent part in the original Old English. I confess that a practice in general was first broken unto me against his majesty for relief of the Catholic cause, and not invented or propounded by myself. And this was first propounded unto me about Easter last, was 12 months beyond the seas, in the Low Countries, of the Archduke Omnipotent by Thomas Winter, who came thereupon with me into England, and there we imparted our purpose to 3 other gentlemen more, namely Robert Catesby, Thomas Percy, and John Wright, who all 5 consulting together of the means how to execute the same, taking a vow among ourselves for secrecies. Catesby propounded to have it performed by gunpowder, and by making a mine under the upper house of Parliament, i.e., the foundations of the wall of Parliament, foundations being of the thickness of 3 yards, which place we made choice of the rather, because religion having been unjustly suppressed there, it was fittest that justice and punishment should be executed there. This being resolved amongst us, Thomas Percy hired an house at Westminster for that purpose, near adjoining the Parliament House. And there we begun to make our mine about 11 December 1604, more than 1 whole year before the date set for the execution of the plot. Soon after we took another unto us, Christopher Wright, having sworn him also, and taking the sacrament of secrecy, we took unto us another gentleman, Robert Winter, in like manner with oath and sacrament, i.e., oaths upon the holy evangelist and the sacrament of the Eucharist. It was about Christmas, or Christ Mass, it actually has Christ Mass with 2 S's at the end there, when we brought our mine unto the wall. All we 7 lay in the house, and had shot and powder, being resolved to die in that place before we should yield or be taken. I returned about the beginning of September next, and then, receiving the key again of Percy, we brought in more powder and billets to cover the same again. And so I went for a time into the country till the 30th of October, 1605. Commissioners present, the Earls of Nottingham, Suffolk, Northampton, Mar, Popham, Worcester, Devonshire, Salisbury, and Dunbar. When the main conspirators, aside from Garnet, were to be hung, several of them made heart-wrenching petitions for their wives, for their children, and for their sisters, with great bowels of nature and tender compassion. When they were intent on murdering the king, queen, little princes, nobles, and the whole parliament, and many other innocents, by a horrible destruction, they showed no such piety, no affection, or tender care. Said Attorney General Sir Edward Coke, all nature, all humanity, all respect of laws, both divine and humane, were quite abandoned. Then was there no conscience made to extirpate the whole nation, and all for a pretended zeal to the Catholic religion, which in of itself is so detestable and damnable fact. In the chapter which follows, we shall have an official account of the trial of the Jesuit superior, Henry Garnet, for treason by the law lords of England, and his replies to the questions put to him regarding his knowledge and involvement in the said Gunpowder Plot. Reader, the fact of this trial will disclose that as privy councillors, Lord Suffolk, Salisbury, and Morton wrote, the Jesuits are not only a subtle society, but also an audacious sort of people, fearing no punishment, no, not the halter, gallows itself. Wow, that is crazy. All right, brothers and sisters, that right there was chapter 3. I'm checking here real quick just to see how far chapter 4 is. Let me see. We're only at 20 minutes. We're going to go ahead and read chapter 4. Confessions and Trial of Henry Garnet. I believe that's Senior, S.J., Doctor of the 5 Ds, compiled with original document. Then, let's see, it says, he who is silent consents. The Jesuits be not only a subtle society, but also an audacious sort of people, fearing no punishment, no, not the halter itself, which is the gallows. Let us take our seats in the London courthouse and follow with the other members of the public the proceedings and evidence of the trial of Henry Garnet, S.J., a man multorum nominum, many names, none good. It is Friday, March 28th, 1606. Henry Garnet is arraigned for trial at Guildhall before law commissioners, specially appointed for that purpose, namely Lord Admiral, Earl of Nottingham, Earl of Salisbury, Lord Chamberlain, Earl of Suffolk, the Earl of Devonshire, Lord Chief Justice John Popham, Earl of Worcestershire, attended by the Lord Recorder of London. Garnet is the Jesuit superior of the Society of Jesus in England. He had previously been professor of philosophy and Hebrew at the Roman College of St. Ignacio, Rome. The evidence presented in this chapter about Garnet's trial is taken directly from official transcripts in pertinent part, which was as follows. The prosecutor at Father Garnet's criminal trial is the famous legal mind, the Attorney General, Sir Edward Coke, who read the following charges brought by the Crown. Henry Garnet had conspired with Robert Catesby to withdraw the hearts of the subjects from their due obedience to God, their king. First, to deprive the king of his crown. Secondly, to murder the king, queen, and the prince. Thirdly, to stir rebellion and sedition in the kingdom. Fourthly, to bring a miserable destruction among the subjects. Fifthly, to change, alter, and subvert the religion here established. Sixthly, to ruinate the state of the Commonwealth and to bring in strangers to invade it, referring to the plan for a Spanish invasion. That whereas Henry Garnet, superior of the Jesuits within the realm of England, alias Whalley, Darcy, Roberts, Farmer, and Henry Phillips, in open rebellion and insurrection against his majesty, against our said sovereign lord the king, did traitorously meet and assemble themselves together, and being so met, said Henry Garnet, Oswald Tesman, John Gerard, with Robert Catesby and other Jesuits, did maliciously, falsely, and traitorously move and persuade that our said sovereign lord the king, the nobility, clergy, and whole commonalty of the realm of England, Papists excepted, were heretics, that all heretics were accursed and excommunicate, and that none heretic could be a king, but that it was lawful and meritorious to kill our said sovereign lord the king and all other heretics within this realm of England. It conclude and agree with gunpowder, as it were with one blast, suddenly, traitorously, and barbarously, to blow up and tear in pieces our said sovereign lord the king. Every one of these charges Garnet pleads not guilty. Having taken the oath to tell the truth, Garnet is asked by Lord Northampton, why did he not previously reveal matters that subsequently intended to prove his collaboration with the gunpowder plotters, which Garnet answered. When one is asked a question before a magistrate, he is not bound to answer before some witnesses be produced against him, because nobody is bound to betray himself, he says. Okay. Garnet then tells the court that the Pope, by his bulls, had forbidden all Catholics from obeying or protecting the life of any ruler who was a heretic or not obedient to the Church of Rome. The Earl of Salisbury then asked Master Garnet, give me one argument that you were not consenting to it, Gunpowder Plot. I can hold in any indifferent objective man's ear or sense besides your bare negative denial. Garnet replies not a word, thereby showing his true mind. It is then put to Garnet, an excuse of letters written with your own hand about the procurement of means for the quicker execution of so desperate an enterprise blowing up the English Parliament. You answer the persons were commended in your letters, but not the plot. But Garnet is not able to say why he would write letters commending the plotters and yet deny his support or involvement in the plot, other than that he commended those who were involved in the plot, but not the plot itself. Okay. When pressed to say for what reason he concealed a project so pernicious both to prince and state, without revealing it either to the king himself or to his minister subordinate, Garnet says that it was because of the duty imposed by the confessional he had to keep the seal of the confessional. To which the Earl of Salisbury responds, God forbid that matters of such weight should hang by feeble threads. Asked if he had any other reason why he felt it just, lawful, or good for him not to have revealed the murderous plot to the king or his ministers, Garnet replies that he had done and said more than was required, that he had dealt plainly with them, the court, but nevertheless he was bound to keep the secrets given to him as a priest at confession, and to disclose nothing that he heard in sacramental confession. Whereupon the Earl of Nottingham asked him, if someone were to confess this day to him that tomorrow morning he meant to kill the king with a dagger, must he conceal it by Catholic law? Whereunto Garnet says that he must conceal it. We interpret Garnet's evidence here to observe the following pertinent facts. Firstly, it was the Jesuits who made confession, the religious dogma of Rome, compulsory for all Roman Catholics. The importance of the confessional in the Jesuits' arsenal is summed up by historian Edmund Paris as follows. During the 16th century, when the Jesuits were formed, confession became a religious duty that was required to be diligently observed, and it was through the confessional that Jesuits secured lasting political influence. Paris tells us in his Secret History of the Jesuits that the main two weapons used by Loyola ordered were, 1, to be the confessors of the mighty and those in high places, and 2, to be the educators of their children. The first is still one of the chief means by which they obtain intelligence and organize their great scheme. But more on that later. It must further be noted that the defense upon which Garnet seeks to rely is based on a falsehood. For the seal of confession is subject to Canon 21 of the Fourth Lateran Council, 1215, binding on the whole Church, which lays down the obligation of secrecy in the following words. Let the priest absolutely beware that he does not, by word or sign or by any manner whatever, in any way betray the sinner. But if he should happen to need wiser counsel, let him cautiously seek the same without any mention of person. Thus Garnet, as a Catholic priest, even by the standards of the twisted Jesuit moral theology of the Fourth Lateran Council, was obliged by Canon 21 to seek wiser counsel cautiously without any mention of Garnet. But by all normal humane standards of morality, he was required to do even more than that. Even if by private or anonymous means, he was morally obliged to at least warn of the plot. And according to Jesuit scholar Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, hold on 1 minute. Okay. According to Jesuit scholar Cardinal Robert Bellarmine, if the person confessing be concealed, it is lawful for a priest to break the seal of confession in order to avert a great calamity. But more damningly, Jesuits had themselves previously propounded a doctrine. There are circumstances in which the confessor, i.e., the priest hearing the confession, may oblige his penitent to disclose, his accomplices, or permit him, the priest, to inform the competent authorities of the crime. Even more conclusive is the fact that the details concerning the treasonous plot were also revealed to Garnet, as he himself admitted by Catesby, this Jesuit Greenwell. No. Maybe do that again. Revealed to Garnet, as he himself admitted by Catesby and the Jesuit Greenwell, both of whom conferred with him thereupon in the presence and hearing of other parties, not just in the confessional. In any event, as Lord Chelmsford, a previous Lord Chancellor, observed, the law was clear. A Catholic priest had no privilege at all to withhold such facts, which came under his knowledge in confession. And the English judge, Lord Westbury, had previously confirmed in R. Constance Kent, there can be no doubt that in a suit or criminal proceeding a clergyman is not privileged so as to decline to answer a question when it is put to him for the purposes of justice, on the ground that his answer would reveal something that he had known in confession. He is compelled to answer such a question, and the law of England does not even extend the privilege of refusing to answer to Roman Catholic clergymen in dealing with a person of their own persuasion. So Garnet had no excuse under canon law, moral law, common law, or Jesuit lore. He is therefore condemned by their own law. Garnet lied when claimed to have only known of the plan of Guy Fawkes, an explosive expert who had served with the Spanish army, through the confessional. Evidence proved his extensive involvement with the plot, his knowledge of it both in and out of confession, and his influential active collaboration with all the conspirators. In fact, the philosopher Voltaire confides that whenever a prince of Orange or a king of France was to be assassinated, the Jesuit assassin always prepared himself by the sacrament of confession. He adds sarcastically that the Jesuit assassins used confession as gluttons take medicine to increase their appetite. Wow. As gluttons take medicine to increase their appetites. Isn't that crazy? Notable examples being the lawyer Balthazar Gerard, alias Francis Guillaume, the assassin of William I, Prince of Orange, and of course, Ravaillac, who assassinated Henry IV. This most illustrious prince of Europe was stabbed in his carriage on narrow Rue de la Ferronnerie. Like the above assassins, Guy Fawkes and his conspirators all took secret oaths and received the sacrament of the Eucharist of the Church in preparation for the plot involving the said Henry Garnet, John Gerard, Oswald Tesman, and other Jesuits. Coming back to Garnet's trial. Shortly before the said grand opening of Parliament on November 5th, 1605, the date the plotters intended to blow it up, Garnet organized a pilgrimage to St. Winifred's Well in Wales, which started from Sir Everard Digby's house in Buckinghamshire and stood on its way at the houses of John Grant and Robert Winter, three of the main conspirators. Moreover, during the pilgrimage, Garnet asked the company of pilgrims to pray for some good success for the Catholic cause at the beginning of Parliament. And Garnet was privy, if not a party, to the murderous powder plot is ipso facto. I don't know what that means. Thus, we are left to wonder, when Garnet denied direct involvement in the plot, was he denying involvement as Garnet, as Wally, as Darcy, as Robert, as Farmer, as Phillips? He was a man of many names. Maybe he denied the allegations as Wally, or perhaps as Farmer, because according to their doctrine of equivoc- equo, no, equivocation, such deceptions are lawful. Indeed, why else would a man of Garnet's stature, head of the English Jesuits and professor of philosophy and Hebrew, have so many names, but for the purpose of equivocation, deception? Interestingly, when fellow Jesuit Francis Tresham, one of the Gunpowder Plot conspirators, an Oxford University educated Catholic, was arrested on the 5th of December, a book was found amongst his papers, a copy of Blackwell's Treatise of Equivocation, and importantly, it contained margin notes in Garnet's own handwriting. When the Recorder of London asked him pointedly whether he only knew of the plot through the confessional box, Garnet admits to the court that he had previously confirmed in his own handwriting that the Jesuit Greenway told him of the powder treason, not as a fault or sin confessed, but as a thing of which he, Mr. Greenway, had knowledge of, which the latter told to Garnet by way of consultation, and not through the confessional box. When this fact is so put to him, Garnet merely replies that whatsoever was written under his hand was true. Thus Garnet admitted his privity to the plot apart from the confessional, which facts he attested to his own hand and admitted to at his trial. In any event, as they say in Latin, quod tactus consentiet, he who is silent consents. The back of Garnet's main defense is thus broken. Garnet is next asked whether he had been made aware of plans to raise money for an army from Spain, which was to be in readiness once the Parliament and sovereign had been killed in the explosion. He readily admitted to. The wretch denies that he knew for what purpose the army would be used. This army the Jesuit plotters had procured to invade England immediately after the gunpowder had blown up Parliament, leaving a defenceless and mourning England at the mercy of their wretched enterprise. But although Garnet initially denies that he knew for what purpose the army would be used, he afterwards, being demanded to speak the truth and having certain evidence presented against him, affirms and confesses that he knew beforehand of the sending to Spain for an army to carry out an invasion. That's why he did not reveal this to the authorities. He answered, I did conceal it after the example of Christ, who commands us to rebuke a brother in secret and not reveal his sins openly. A slander against the memory of Christ. Upon that subject, will these Jesuits not dissemble and equivocate? Garnet's imitation of Christ, for the most part, comes well short of the pattern, but in the imitation of evil, he all but exceeds the example given by Christ's adversary. In Garnet, we see evinced the usual fortitude of a martyr after the Ignatian model. At the close of the court's inquiry, Lord Northampton, quite incensed, says to Garnet, for though you pretend to have received a deep wound in conscience at the first revealing of the plot, to have lost your sleep with vexation of spirit, to have offered and prayed to God for his preventing grace, yet all this while you suffered the project to proceed, you helped and assisted their endeavors that were laborers, you wrote earnest letters both to Baldwin and to Cresswell, and also to Fawkes, for their furtherance of ordinary means. You gave orders for a prayer to be said by Catholics for their prosperous success. Says Lord Northampton, continuing his address to Garnet, while you pretend to have broken both your sleeps and your brain, i.e., what you do with the information he had about the plot, it may be that your mind was perplexed and disquieted upon the meditation of strange events, for so was the mind of Cain, Achitophel, and Judas that betrayed his master. The more you labor to get out of the wood, referring to Garnet's attempt to extricate himself, the further you creep in. But Garnet offers no reply other than to repeat what he had already said about the seal of the confessional. Evidence concluded, Attorney General Sir Edward Coke His closing address says of Garnet, he is a doctor of the Jesuits, that is, a doctor of 5 deeds. That is, dissimulation, disposing of princes, disposing of kingdoms, daunting and deterring of subjects, and destruction. The jury then retires to consider the evidence presented. Within less than a quarter of an hour, they return with a decision. The English superior of the Jesuits, Henry Garnet, is found guilty by unanimous verdict. Having been found guilty of high treason, John Popham, Earl of Suffolk, and Lord Chief Justice pronounces the sentence for treason on him. Garnet was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered on May 3rd, 1606, and so on said day he took his last breath in St. Paul's Churchyard, London, aged. In a letter dated May 2nd, 1606, the day before Garnet was hung, Sir Dudley Carleton mockingly prophesied, he, Garnet, will equivocate at the gallows, that he will be hanged without equivocation. Indeed, Garnet's infamous Jesuitical equivocations were satirized by Shakespeare in his famous play Macbeth. Really? Huh. Even if we were to believe that Father Garnet was not directly involved in the Gunpowder Plot, as it seems clear he was, he could not claim innocence, as the plot itself was but a fruit of the Jesuits' own doctrines and instructions, drawn wholly out of the propositions and principles. Moreover, he wrote several letters to the plotters giving moral support to their scheme, even calling upon Catholics to pray for its success. Significantly, 3 years earlier, in 1602, Garnet had received briefs from Pope Clement VIII directing that no person unfavorable to the Catholic religion should be allowed to succeed the throne of England. The reader may judge whether the following revelations by the author Jardine does not decide conclusively the guilt of the Jesuit Garnet and his order. This writer brings forward a most striking fact. He says that first time of the King's James I accession till within a fortnight of the 5th of November, Catesby and Garnet were found in constant confidential communication. Indeed, Jardine tells us that Catesby had been an accomplice with Garnet in 2 previous treason plots. Thus, in Garnet's guilty verdict, the consequences of his doctrine's previous actions came home to roost. What is even more telling is the admission of the famous Cretan Jesuit Edmund Johannes in his defense of Garnet. Edmund wrote an apology in which he said that Garnet did not approve of the deed, but he liked the result that might have followed. What a statement. It is also, hold on, let me make sure I got this going on here. It is also a matter worthy of note that Garnet had come into England 20 years previous, July 15th, not July 15th, July 1586. Very year, another Catholic, Anthony Babington, was executed for involvement in a plot to murder Queen Elizabeth I and free the Catholic pretender, Mary Queen of Scots. That was 2 years in anticipation of the great Catholic Armada of Spain, sent to invade and conquer England, the Pope. Readers, do all of these revelations not make your hair stand on end? As the lawyers say, res ispa locutor, things speak for itself. That's what it means. To quote Lord Northampton, what works in the human breast, the savagery of the wolf, the rabidness of the dog, the venom of the serpent, all found in the doctrines of the Jesuits. For when the conspirators doubted in themselves of the lawfulness of the plot, they were reassured of its justice by the Jesuit Tesman, who gave them full absolution of any sin and confided the same to Garnet. Truly, I have not seen nor ear of man heard the like of these things, which horrid animus from the synagogue of naughty men. As an aside, we note too that gunpowder is the invention of Berthold Schwartz, a German priest, who is also said to be the inventor of firearms. Why would a priest even think about creating gunpowder? There is no fitter conclusion to not grant, Garnet's trial than the words of Earl Salisbury. Poor Henry Garnet might have undergone a more ordinary trial in some other place of less note and observation. This opportunity was put into the king's hand, whereby there might be made visible to the world an anatomy of popish doctrine, from whence these treasons have their source and support. There is not a fitter stage for this exposure than the city of London. Father Henry Garnet's story did not end with his death. Relics and reminders of him were savored and passed secretly among his followers. Other Catholics acquired different parts of his apparel, which, according to the Jesuit Gerard, are now esteemed of more than their weight in gold. And Petrus Ribadonera, a book published with the approbation of the Pope, reckons Garnet, Southwell, Oldcorn, and other gunpowder traders to be martyrs of the Jesuit society. Garnet has been given a rule of martyrdom and is today regarded by his church as a saint. Yes, Saint Garnet of the Gunpowder Plot, a man of many names, but of no good name. None of Garnet's actions should surprise us, as it was the founder and first general of the Jesuits, Ignatius Loyola, who mined all such treasures of Jesuit Sophism. Ignatian principles, a Jesuit could justify any act by convincing himself that it was ad mortem diem gloriam. Loyola wrote, "It would be greatly advantageous not to permit anyone infected with heresy to continue in the government, particularly the supreme government of any province or town, or in any judicial or honorary position." Loyola also taught his order such niceties as wrong is right if it is for the gain of the church, and the end justified the means, and by any means necessary. Thus, the gunpowder treason plot was merely a fruit of the poisonous tree. All of these convenient rules were kept alive and promulgated after Loyola's death in his constitutions. Indeed, such adages or maximums repeatedly crop up in almost every Jesuit book. And to be sure, these are just a few of the more noteworthy illustrations of the sophistries taught by the Society of Jesus, a most enigmatic breed of monks. The many other schemes, plots, convulsions, and contrivances they have orchestrated ad mortem de gloriam, we shall have much opportunity to speak. Nor is any of this a private view or some particular prejudice of mine, but a public testimony, exhibited in print to all who would care to read, and to the world. The aforementioned plot was executed under the generalship of the Prince of the Jesuits at Rome, Claude Aquaviva, 1581 to 1618. The fifth superior general of Secreta Monita fame, who is described as the beau ideal of Jesuitism, political intrigue, crafty, insinuating, preserving, with an inflexible intrepidity of character, the perfect Jesuit. There is one other murderous scheme, which story deserves a passing notice. Having foiled in their gunpowder plot of 1605, they sought to make good their failure later that century. On January 24th, 1679, the procurator for the English Jesuits, William Ireland, made another failed attempt at regicide. He was found guilty, and, like Garnet before him, was put to death in London for plotting to kill the king. These men stopped at nothing. Nor must we forget to mention similar, or rather worse, instances of Jesuit regicide which occurred in France. In 1593, a Jesuit priest, Auguste Barry, attempted the life of King Henry IV. In 1594, another assassination attempt was made by Jean Catel. The murder of King Henry IV was finally effected by the Jesuit lawyer Francisco Ravaillac on May 14, 1610, following the Edict of Nantes. This edict gave freedom of worship to all Christians and was vehemently opposed by the Catholic Church. Paris writes, Edmund Paris, on the 16th of May, 1610, On the eve of his campaign against Austria, he, Henry the Fourth, was murdered by Ravaillac in his own chamber. The entire plot was set up by the Jesuits. The Duke of Epamon, who made the king read a letter while the assassin was lying in wait, was a notorious friend of the Jesuits. And the Michelet was proved that they knew of this plot. Ravaillac had given confession of his plans to the Jesuit father D'Aubigny just before the assassination, and when the judges interrogated this Jesuit priest as to why he did not reveal his knowledge of the plot beforehand, he merely replied that God had given him the gift to forget immediately what he heard in the confessional. And they're such big fat liars, aren't they? In fact, Ravaillac later confessed to having been inspired by the writings of Jesuit fathers Marinia and Suarez. These two Jesuits sanctioned the murder of heretic tyrants. But the Jesuit doctor Philisac, Ravillac's father, confessor, God be thanked, Ravaillac has died like a saint. I heard his confession, and it is certain that he is in paradise. The sacrament of confession, infallibility worked out salvation, which conducts straightway to paradise, where he is now. Ravaillac will repose in the bosom of Abraham. Wow. After Henry's death, the revocation of the Edict of Nantes drove 500,000 Protestants into exile. We must not forget also Jacques Clement, who, on August 1st, 1589, stabbed King Henry III the Great on the streets of Paris in broad day. Both these assassins, Ravaillac and Clement, were recommended by the Jesuit and the clergy for meritorious service, and were even applauded from their pulpits. Images and pictures of the regicides were exhibited in the church chapel, placed on altars, and the assassins treated as though they were canonized saints. Clement was called an angel by the Jesuit priest Camelet, and Jesuit professor Guillauard taught his students that Clement did nothing wrong. God Clement, wrote Guillauard, has done a meritorious act inspired by the Holy Spirit. The Jesuit Marina, whose writings had inspired Ravaillac, cites Clement's crime as an example of the true type of tyrannicide. Then there was the Jesuit-controlled Balthazar, aka forgive me, Balthazar, who, encouraged by the Jesuits at their college in Treves to assassinate William I, Prince of Orange, for which an act of regicide Catholic King Philip II of Spain rewarded Balthazar's parents with 3 country estates in Livermont, Hastel, and Camp Martin. Quotations such as these could be multiplied by the thousands. Jesuits have executed deeds of regicide many times over, assassination being, next to poisoning, the most favored method of choice. Volumes of such Jesuit crimes could easily be compiled ad nauseam. History reveals that in almost every instance, the real cause of seditions, tumults, revolutions, and disorder in France, Spain, and Portugal was to be found with Jesuits. Read for yourself the grim assessment of one of their former pupils, the Abbot Marcet de la Roche-Fernand, who spent 8 years in a Jesuit college. Quote, how can any honest man live among them? Do you wish to excite trouble, to provoke revolution, to produce the total ruin of your country? Call the Jesuits. Unquote. The grand maxim, says Wiley, wherever they are, is agitate, agitate. And he adds, if despotisms will not serve them, their maximum is to demoralize society and render government impossible, and from the resulting chaos to remodel the world anew, as if they're not doing that now. Thus we see that, like their more openly violent offshoot in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin, Jesuits are prepared to talk peace when it serves them, but are ready for war when it does not. Reader, the Jesuits are men of the most subtle and diabolical industry, initiated into all the mysteries of hell. And within their camp are vipers, scorpions, and every other venomous thing. Since his opinion, no. Since this opinion may seem some as eccentric, I shall confirm it by sufficient authority of divers authors, so that I may the better clear it from the prejudice of the upstart or the incredulous of mind. I assure you, I do not overstate the matter. Read for yourself this desperate appeal from Privy Councillors Lord Suffolk, Salisbury, and Morton to Lord Falkland and the Lord Deputy of Ireland in a letter dated March 2nd, 1657. Quote, Jesuits not only a subtle society, but also an audacious sort of people, fearing no punishment, no, not the halter itself, which was the gallows, so that we are at nonplus perplexed how to banish or devise a means to chase away these wasps from his Majesty's dominion. Niccolini seconds this testimony. Quote, no danger, not even that of death, can deter a Jesuit from following his projects, when once they are considered profitable to the order, or necessary to avenge it of its enemies. The moment they could return from exile, the instant they were set free, they returned to their plots and intrigues with unabated ardor and a most wonderful obstinacy. Reader, there is more than mere rhetoric in these two sentences than in a whole library of sermons, and indeed, if those sentences were understood by the reader with the same emphasis as they are delivered by the author, Niccolini, we needed not any more instruction in the value of the character and machinations of the Jesuits. Wow, that is insane. And that G.B. Niccolini, I believe he wrote a book, History of the Jesuits. So there we go. I did go over an hour. Oh, almost. Hopefully it will upload. Brothers and sisters, keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. Embed the Word of God on the tablets of your heart, my heart, so we will not sin against God or be deceived. Until next time, I love you all. Bye-bye.